Coming up on this week's show, we get a little bit naughty and a little bit nice as we talk to several best-selling authors about the Mpreg genre.
This is the Big Gay Fiction Podcast, the show for avid readers and passionate fans of gay romance fiction. Each week, we bring you exclusive author interviews, book recommendations, and explore the latest in gay pop culture.
Welcome to episode 215 of the Big Gay Fiction Podcast. I'm Jeff from JeffAdamsWrites.com, and with me, as always, is my co-host and husband, Will Knaus.
Hello, everybody.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you in part by our remarkable community on Patreon. We'll have more information on how you can join them at the end of the show, along with a sneak peek of what we have coming up for you next week.
But right now, we have something special. I think it's something that we don't get to do very often. Essentially, we have a roundtable author interview. When we were at GRL in October, we gathered a group of incredibly talented and impressive authors, and we kind of sat around and discussed the popularity of the Mpreg genre. And you're going to want to stick around because you're going to be hearing from some heavy hitters. This interview contains words of wisdom from the likes of Nora Phoenix and Silvia Violet, Susi Hawke, and Victoria Sue. They're all wonderful and they're funny and give a little bit of insight into why Mpreg has become so very popular. And you're going to want to stick around to the end of the interview because after we finish talking to these wonderful ladies, we're going to have a quick chat with Charlie David about his work as a narrator on some Mpreg books. So shall we get to it?
Absolutely, let's do it.
When I saw the list of authors that were coming to GRL, I was frankly tickled pink that I saw so many Mpreg authors, and that 4 of them have agreed to sit with us today and talk about this wildly popular subgenre. I'm so very thrilled. I'm going to have each of you introduce yourselves and explain a little bit about what subgenre you write in. I'd like to start immediately on my left. Nora, introduce yourself.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. My name is Nora Phoenix. I write, obviously, Mpreg. I also write contemporary, and I like to throw in some random subgenres like sci-fi and apocalyptic whenever the mood strikes. I switch off between Mpreg and contemporary because I like both. I don't want to be stuck in one thing, and it keeps the mind creative if you switch off. I've been writing for about 2 years now and having a ton of fun.
I'm Silvia Violet, and I write Mpreg with shapeshifters. And I also write shapeshifter paranormals that don't include Mpreg, as well as contemporary. And like Nora, I like to switch back and forth. It keeps me fresh. If I stick in one subgenre for too long, it's just harder to get inspired to write. I have been publishing for almost 15 years. I started out in male-female romance, and in 2011 started writing and have pretty much been there since.
Hi, I'm Victoria Sue. I write Mpreg all the way to serial killers. I haven't managed both of them in the same book yet, but give me a chance. I've been writing Mpreg for 4 years, started out with shifters, and then my most recent series, his first, is Omegaverse.
I'm Susi Hawke. I've been writing for a little over 2 years. Primarily Mpreg. This year I switched to doing contemporary also. My Mpreg, I do both shifters and contemporary Mpreg and Omegaverse.
Fantastic. Now, one of the main reasons that I wanted to do sort of this informal panel with the 4 of you is because despite the fact that the subgenre has taken off, especially in the last couple of years, is that there are some people who still have no idea what Mpreg is. And I wanted this episode of the podcast to sort of serve as an introduction to the genre, maybe sort of Mpreg 101. So I thought we'd start out with some definitions that are unique and special to this type of story. To start off, Mpreg actually stands for male pregnancy. We'll get that out of the way first. I think one of the most basic definitions, of course. I think when it comes to this subgenre, it generally falls into 2 different categories.
Contemporary Mpreg is Mpreg without shifters. It's just regular people who have the ability to get pregnant. Omegaverse means Mpreg is not necessarily in the book, but they're there in the universe. Piper Scott is known for that. She'll write books that you may or may not have a pregnancy, and that's Omegaverse. My newest series, Assassin's Clause, is Omegaverse, even though it's shifters, because there isn't a pregnancy in every book.
So basically, I think for some readers, at least, if they see Mpreg in the series title, or that's how you advertise it, they expect there to be a pregnancy that is
And birth.
part of the focus of the book that's taken all the way through birth. Whereas if it's labeled Omegaverse, there might be, there might not be, that ability's there, but maybe that a pregnancy is not going to happen in that book.
Yeah, and I
It's an
think with
important
shifter
clarification.
it's the same. So it can have a pregnancy, it doesn't have to have one. So you have a little more freedom in whether or not it fits into your story.
But it's so important because our readers will be livid if we market Mpreg and there is no baby.
Yes.
But if they know it's Omegaverse, it's okay.
I'd like to talk about a couple of familiar tropes in the genre. One of the first is, of course, that one of the heroes is going to have to end up pregnant at some point, which means unprotected sex. And I'd like to talk about that and how you handle, from a storytelling perspective, the reasons why the heroes might choose unprotected sex. And how creative do you have to get sometimes in order to come up with those reasons?
That's quite easy, actually, because all my Mpregs take part in a paranormal world. So my shifters don't contract human diseases. So that takes immediate care of that. In the normal world, condoms break.
That's exactly what I would have said. Well, that's pretty much a general thing across the board. We all have our different worlds we create and the ways we come at it, but it's all the same for that. Shifters, that's our one free pass. They don't carry human diseases, and yes, condoms break.
What I love is that you're not bound to the same, I don't want to call them rules, but they kind of are, as you are in contemporary non-Mpreg romance, where you have to be super careful to have your characters have unprotected sex for obvious reasons. In Shifter, in Mpreg, you can get away with that, which gives you a little more room to play with.
And I think also different authors handle that differently. For some, it is just, well, this is a shifter world, and they're not worried about disease, and so it's not as much of an issue. And then some, I've read some contemporaries where, it is, and then you have to figure out, like, okay, well, is it going to be the condom break? Is it going to be just heat of the moment, or, and have to get more creative.
Heat of the moment. That's a fun joke for an Mpreg book.
Yeah.
I love that. That was a great pun.
We spoke just a moment ago about the pregnancy and whether certain readers expect there to be a birth by the end of the book. I think commonly there's an epilogue in most stories where we flash forward a couple of months to find out what happened to our happy couple. Do your readers expect that in most of your books?
They want the whole thing. They want the whole 12-hour delivery. They want the whole blood, guts, and gore. They want the whole pain. They want the...
Don't stuff that shit in the
no.
epilogue
If you miss that out, you are in big trouble. They want the whole thing: swollen ankles, high blood pressure.
So one of the reasons I believe that I became more known as an author is because I focused on the pregnancy and the delivery, and that was entirely accidental because I was in the hospital and I was reading Mpreg books because I stumbled across it. I was like, well, this is interesting. And I'm reading the reviews, and all the reviews are like, they didn't show the pregnancy. And then I became hyper aware of that. Mm-hmm. So when I started writing, I said, I've got to include the pregnancy. And in my first series, I didn't show the delivery. And everyone loved the series, but every set of reviews has at least one person saying, I wish we could have seen the delivery. So,
and then you've got the problem of the whole 9 months, if you're going to choose that, which is an easy thing for shifters, because wolves kind of themselves give birth at like 24 weeks or something like that. So you can usually dial that back a little bit. Unless you're going to write a 300-page book, you can't really do a
Time
9-month
jumps.
pregnancy, or you need time jumps
Yeah.
or something like that. And sometimes the readers will feel cheated unless you give them a real reason for why it's happening in a short space of time.
I think I get away with that a little. I have one Mpreg series. It's a continuing series. I tend to bend the Mpreg conventions a little, try to, not deliberately, but I play around with what was common a little. So my first books don't even have a pregnancy, the first two in the series. And that because it's a continuing storyline, I have the time to set up the pregnancy. I have the time to set up all the issues during the pregnancy. For me, the biggest challenge, because it's a continuing series and I have a lot of pregnant people at the same time, is that I need an Excel sheet to keep track of due dates delivery dates and what age babies are. And my Excel sheet by now is pretty damn complicated, but it's fun, yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely been a challenge for me at times with figuring out the timeline. And I've certainly done, in my Trillium Creek series, I do a lot of get to a certain point in the pregnancy, give them the pregnancy symptoms and all that sort of stuff, but then skip ahead and the epilogue is the birth scene. That works for me. And I also, it's a shifter series, so they have a 6-month gestation.
Same with me, yeah.
If you've read my books, very many of them, you'll notice there's a pattern. I have 3 pivotal things that have to be hit in every book. We have to have the big aha, we discovered the pregnancy moment. We have to have the morning sickness or the clue that there's pregnant. And we have to have the sweet moment of the other partner rubbing his feet or his belly or being sweet and tender. You have to include those. And also my shifter pregnancies, what you were talking about, how we can play around with it, I tie them to the real-life animals' gestation rates to make it shorter. So my wolves have 3-month pregnancies. I mean,
Yeah, makes it easier if you have shorter pregnancies. Because
does.
9 months in a book, you have to do some time jumps if a pregnancy is 9 months.
Definitely. Yeah, I
So it
actually
makes it more
took like
challenging.
different, like the 6-month time and made a little chart of converting that. Like, where would you be if it had been a 9-month pregnancy? How many weeks to hit that morning? That where you might get morning sickness, where you might start to show, where you might, you know.
Where it's detectable. And
Yeah,
that's what I do.
did math.
And math is hard.
Math is hard.
Susie, you brought up an interesting point. Traditionally, shifter books feature wolves, but of course, any kind of animal can be used in an Mpreg shifter story. Can we talk about some of the different species that each of you have maybe
You want to talk
used?
about unicorns, don't you?
I love those unicorn books so very, very much. In the genre, there is a startling array when it comes to shifter stories, like the books that Susie has done with Piper Scott, the Redneck Unicorns, which I adored. How about you guys? Are there other types that you've explored in your stories?
I am currently working on a dragon series in the middle of November that will start to be available. So it's a dragon shifter series. That's been really, really interesting, and dealing with the, a non-mammal shifter species, and kind of figuring out the world building of that has been really interesting for me.
I have my one series, which is kind of a cross between shifter and non-shifter, because I've created a world where shifting is no longer possible for reasons. And then I slowly introduce a development, which means that they can shift again, but not everybody. So it's kind of I'm giving away spoilers here. Sorry. If you haven't read the books, I apologize. But I loved playing with that, because you get to start out with, I don't want to say regular people, because obviously it's still Mpreg, but you don't have the shifter capabilities, but you introduce them slowly. And I found it very fun to play around with that, but they are wolf shifters. So I've kept to as many of the wolf characteristics in terms of length of pregnancy as I could.
In both my Serious Wolf series and my Alpha King series, they are all shifter, wolf, human pairings. That's
I love that series.
Yeah, and it's usually the human that, like, often he doesn't know that werewolves exist, and then how the heck did I manage to get pregnant in the first place? And that's usually I like that. That's a bit of fun.
I also love the series that Piper wrote with Virginia Kelly with dragons, Megs, they call it, Mpreg with eggs. That series was phenomenal. That was absolutely hilarious. Great, yeah, very original. I love that.
For me, I have all the
Yeah,
shifters. The
she
funny
has a lot.
thing is, I was kind of a snob when I started out. I was like, no, it's a wolf, it's a bear, or it's a dragon, that's it. And then I was co-writing with Krista Crown, our Team Alpha, and she's like, Susie, we have to have other shifters. So she keeps writing in all these weird things, and I end up loving them. So we've got snakes and hedgehogs and flamingos and herons.
You have flamingo shifters?
She has
How did I miss those?
she has a goat doctor. I mean, and then now what happened? I find myself writing them, and it's fun. So you just gotta roll with it. I don't think there's an animal I probably wouldn't write into a book at this point. But the main ones that sell that readers really look for are wolves, bears, and dragons.
The classic trio.
Yes.
Classics.
Let's get into some definitions from the subgenre. Let's get a little biological. Talk to me about what it means for heat in an Mpreg book.
From my point of view, it goes basically back to the female and their menstrual cycle. To put it bluntly, get biologically with it, that's where the idea comes from the heat, that they omegas, or the person that's going to get pregnant, whether they're shifter or non-shifter, goes into a heat cycle. This is the time at which they can get pregnant. That's what it's traditionally, that shows them, that's the kind of like the few days they can get pregnant. And that runs the gamut of some omegas that need sex, need orgasms to basically function.
She's the
afterwards.
wrong person to be answering this because she's too ladylike. Nora.
It sounds so proper when she says it.
You said I can cuss. That's when they're fucking owning. And they need
Exactly.
it. And they can get pregnant. And it's like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you're so ladylike.
I think it depends on the way the author handles it because, I've read Mpreg where heat was just the time that you're fertile. And maybe, you'd be more interested in sex then, but it's just, more like the time when women are fertile in our human world. But then I've read ones where they are truly like completely unable to think, unable to function. And at that point, to me, I feel like it is. And so, in my series, I set it up to where my characters make clear their consent before they reach that level of being out of it.
I had my guy in Lost in Dallas. He iced him down. He put ice packs all over him until he could clearly say, yes, I consent. Also, in a lot of my books with heat, it comes on, you get your first heat when you meet your fated mate. So I don't think the dubious consent is as much of a thing when it's your other half of your soul.
Well, in my series, it's very much an issue because I've built a world where, and again, I have to be so careful not to spoil the whole series, but where there's certain omegas who have a genetic mutation that makes their heat even more intense. And I wanted to do that on purpose. Again, Mpreg is seen as maybe a light genre, but I like to put a little message in there. And I think discussion about consent is a super important one. And it's one of the reasons why I put that in the book, to be able to have characters talk about that.
You're right, it is important. When I say I get irritated by it, I mean I get irritated when people just throw it around without really knowing what they're talking about. They don't really read Mpreg, so they just throw it out there, and then that's when I get irritated. I am super protective, like come at me, bro, when it comes to Mpreg, not because I write it, but because the readers are the most loyal readers of any genre. And I just want to hug them all to my heart and just don't put down their genre.
There's so much that we could go into, like alpha and omega dynamics, and as one of you mentioned before, fated mates. But I want to ask for a definition of one more thing, something Jeff just learned about today, as a matter of fact. He was talking to another author of Mpreg.
Please say not.
I
Please
want
say
to.
not.
Yes, exactly.
I was waiting for that.
I would like to talk about the concept of knotting. And for those of you who are listening, I'm talking about knot with a K, K-N-O-T. So who would like to tackle this discussion first?
I will.
Susie, go ahead.
I knew
and-
she was going to jump on that.
I'm going to jump on it for two reasons. Because I have two different types of knots in my books. So dogs knot, cats knot. They have their barbs. In the animal kingdom, animals get locked together so that the seed stays in long enough to impregnate. That's just how it's biologically set up. If we're writing shifters, it makes sense to have the knot for the same reason. And a lot of readers love the knot because as it expands and presses on all those lovely little places that humans have, it's almost like being fisted after that point, and it adds the kink that the readers love. But for me, the knotting is about the connection, because a lot of mine only true mates can knot. So when you're locked together after you've had sex, you can't just roll over, you can't just get up and go out and have a cigarette or go to the bathroom or whatever. You have to be tender, and you have that moment of vulnerability. So that's what I love about knotting. And then I mentioned the cat barbs. I have a lot of people ask me about this, the knotting vortex. I have cat shifters where they have little nubbins that come out like Velcro, or that with the sensitivity of nipples that go in a spiral, and they get locked together like that, and they come out. And that's my version of like a cat barb and a knot. And it's all in the same thing.
I think what Susie says is very right. If you ask readers, and we do regularly ask our readers, what do you love about Mpreg? They'll say the babies and the pregnancy, but knotting is one of the things they
Knotting
mention
is
a lot.
definitely up there.
But I think it actually speaks to a deeper level, this symbolism, that two people have to be so intimately connected for certain things to happen. And when you're writing romance, you're writing a love story, that's the whole gist of the matter, that two people not only physically connected, but they're part of each other's soul, and that's what readers want to read about. They want to hear about the deeper connections and how that's demonstrated.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. When I first learned about Mpreg a couple of years ago, I thought like, ugh, what? But then I saw how popular it was becoming, and I said, okay, I'm going to give this a try. And it was wonderful, and it was unique, and like crazy, super sexy. And I think those early days of Mpreg, it was mainly focused a lot on the sex. And I think in the intervening years, the stories have become a little bit more complex, and it's more about the romance and the connection, as you were just speaking about, Victoria. I think that's what readers have really started to connect with, and why they're so loyal, especially now. There's just been a remarkable surge in popularity in this particular subgenre. And I wanted to ask you, why is it so popular with readers now?
I think right now a lot of readers are looking for things that make them feel good. I think a lot of people are enjoy that aspect of like a book that's going to end not just with a happily ever after, but with a happy family, especially a lot of people who maybe their own family is not happy. And so while certainly not true of all Mpreg, but a lot of Mpreg books are there's a lot of sweet romance or sweet moments and those connections, like you were saying.
No serial killers.
No serial killers.
Except in her.
Like I said, it doesn't speak to all, but I think a lot of people have come to rely on that genre as a place that they're going to get a book that's going to make them feel really good in a time where a lot of us are feeling really uncertain.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is very right. A lot of Mpreg books also have that theme of found family, because we often write about either pacts, which are most of the time not related by blood, but more related by pack bonds. You kind of have that found family, and as we all know, not everybody has that in their real life, and we all read to escape. And I think it's a happy escape for readers to read about something that maybe they would want to see in their own lives, that makes them happy, that just distracts them from the realities of life. And that's why I read it too.
Plus a hot guy and holding a baby. I mean, please.
There's that, obviously.
There's that.
Some of my Mpreg author friends and I, who we're in a chat group where we all exchange ideas and brainstorm and chat together. That's one thing that we all come back to is the thing that's great about Mpreg is it doesn't matter whether it's male-male, female-female, male-female. If two people love each other, they can make their own family. And one partner has the
Yes.
ability.
Yeah.
I'm curious. Susie spoke to this earlier that she started reading Mpreg when you were recovering in the hospital. How did you each individually discover Mpreg and decide that you wanted to write it?
My first Mpreg was super weird. I can't remember the title. I was reading Romance, and it came recommended on Amazon. I think through Kindle Unlimited probably, and I started reading it, and I didn't understand one bit of it. It made completely no sense. They were talking about alphas and omegas. I didn't know what nodding was, and I was just completely lost. So then for a while, I didn't read it, and then Susie started writing it, and we connected pretty early in our careers. And I started reading her books, and I was like, okay, this I can get into, this I love. I started writing it actually because of sort of a challenge in my group. We were talking in my Facebook group how few poly-romance books there are, not necessarily MMM, but with more than 3M, so MMMM or more. And my readers kind of challenged me like, Nora, you need to write a story with 4 men. So my mind went spinning with that, and that's how my Mpreg series was born, because for me, 4 men, I wanted to have a situation where they needed each other, not just emotionally, but physically needed each other. And to me, that was almost automatically linked to Mpreg. So I came up with the first 2 books in my Irresistible Omega series, where there are 4 men, 2 alphas, 1 beta, 1 omega. And I loved it. I still love writing it, and I still love reading it. So yeah, these authors I've all read, and much more.
Fantastic.
For me, actually, this may show how kind of stubborn I can be at times. I got started reading it because there was sort of a thing on Facebook where somebody was bashing the genre. Yes. And I was like, I've never read it. I've never been sure it was my thing, but now I am going to read it, and I'm going to get some recommendations, and I'm going to see what this is all about, because I don't like seeing any part of our larger genre put down in that way. And I loved what I read, Nora's series and several other series. And so then I had been writing contemporary for a while, and I wanted to write a paranormal series. And as I started thinking about a wolf shifter series, I was like, you know what, I'm going to make this an Mpreg shifter series because I'm loving this. And that was kind of where my reading energy had been. And so I wrote my Trillium Creek series out of that experience.
Fantastic. And Victoria Sue?
I wrote my first Mpreg in 2014, and I had a couple of arguments with my publisher over making, it's a 7-book series, and it's a continuation. There isn't a birth in every series, and my publisher at that time wasn't sure it was going to sell, but it did.
You proved them wrong.
Yes, I did.
Good,
Yeah.
good.
And I honestly, I'd heard of the concept, but I'd never read one before I started writing one.
Where do you think this subgenre is going? I think what's kind of wonderful and interesting about Mpreg is that while there are certain things readers might insist on when they pick up an Mpreg book, there's so many different directions that you can take a story. You can have like alphas in space, or you can do a sweet small town story about a Omega school teacher who hooks up with the alpha jock he knew 10 years ago.
See, now he's just giving us plot bunnies, really.
Right.
Please write that book.
Alphas in space.
But,
I mean, it sounds kind of cool. I like that.
You can have that. I'll take the school teacher.
Or we could write together.
There are so many different avenues that you can explore. Where do you think the genre is going?
I see it going nowhere but up, because my friend Ann-Katrin Bird, she writes Mpreg. She was told 5 years ago that Mpreg was on its way out. It was dying. It was a dead thing. Go away from it. Don't do it anymore. She stubbornly persisted, in her Oceanport series is fantastic. And she was one of my people who got me more into it. And since I've been writing in the 2 years a little over 2 years that I've been writing Mpreg, I have noticed the quality has increased, the amount of authors has increased. It used to be you could name off the Mpreg authors off the top of your head. Now, good luck. There are so many, and they're so varied, and they're so talented. And we're just growing every day, and we get new readers every day. My reader group on Facebook, I've got over 2,100 members. I have a huge newsletter of followers who all love Mpreg, and I keep thinking, oh, but they've read it all now, I've done it all, and then I'll write a new book, and someone will message me and tell me that thanks that they just discovered Mpreg because of that book. So there are new people coming in every day. So we're just going to keep growing and exploding because the quality that we've brought, my big thing I'm going to go off on a tangent, I'm sorry. When I came into Mpreg, there was so much stuff out there where it just wasn't good. It was crap. It wasn't edited. It wasn't complete stories. I mean, you'd pay $2.99 and get 60 pages, and they're kissing one minute, and he's giving birth to a basket of kittens the next. Come on. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to do this, but I'm going to give quality because that's what I wanted to give my readers. I wasn't going to charge them for a book if I didn't feel it was a quality story. And I really feel like myself and my peers are the ones who have brought it up and made it more. The readers expect quality because they've been taught to by us because we've given more quality to it.
Yeah, we raised the bar. I think with any genre, as soon as something becomes popular, people will jump on it. And some people will jump on it just to make money. And for a while, Mpreg was seen as a quick way to make money, which means that people just, like Susie said, they just put out crap just in attempts to make money. And it has given Mpreg a bit of a bad name for a while. But like Susie said, I'm really proud of the way it's grown.
I am so proud. And the quality authors, and we can do things in Mpreg that we can't do in contemporary. Yes. We can go bareback in Mpreg. We can explore more social issues than you can in contemporary, unless you want to write a 500-page tome. Yeah. So, we deal with social justice issues in so many books, and we throw it all out there, and we expose it, and we bring it to light, and we give the healing ending and the happily ever afters, and it's just, it's getting better, and it's going to keep getting better.
Although I have to say that idea of alphas in space, I mean, we could have space Mpreg
I can't, and let me tell you why. I grew up watching the Muppet Show, and all I heard from that was pigs in space.
But just right there shows, like, there's so many places you can go with it. So the whole concept of the alpha, beta, omega world, the whole idea of the pregnancy and how the pregnancy is handled and how long and how does it differ from the real world. And there's so many combinations that you can make and so many creative ways to handle it that I just there's all kinds of stuff that hasn't been done yet, as well as readers that want the same kind of story that they've had.
No, just like contemporary keeps evolving, Mpreg does the same. Like you said, there's no ceiling. We haven't done everything we can yet, not by far.
It's not going anywhere anytime soon.
No.
Quickly, I wanted to talk about something Victoria Sue brought up, is that most publishers either don't understand or aren't interested about Mpreg and publishing it. Practically every author that writes Mpreg that I know of publishes independently. Can you talk a little bit about what it was like, whether it was a burden or a joy when it comes to taking your own career into your own hands and self-publishing these kinds of stories?
I've never even considered going for a publisher. Mm-hmm. I used to publish or used to write nonfiction under a different name through a publisher, and despite working my ass off, the bottom line is it's not zero, but it's very close to zero. So my experiences, and this was a reputable publisher, and they were great guys, but it's just that it goes through so many layers, is that you end up with very little. So when I started writing fiction, I had already decided I'm going to do this myself. It gives you incredible freedom. I love the idea of having full control. I can choose my own covers. I can choose my release dates. I can choose whether I want to do sales. I can do my own marketing. I like that, but I'm a control freak, so there's that.
Yeah, I had already been self-publishing in other genres before writing Mpreg, and like Nora, I really like the control that it gives me. There are a lot of pieces to put together when you're doing everything yourself, but there are also tons of amazing industry professionals to help with that, and so I'm very happy as an independent publisher.
Yes to what you two just said, but I think bluntly put as well, a lot of Mpreg authors publish on KU, and
Yes.
publishing houses cannot compete with that price structure. So that's a basic monetary reason as well.
Kindle Unlimited is a big part of where our income comes from, and most publishers don't want to put books in Kindle Unlimited, and most of our readers are very voracious readers. I recently did a poll through my website where I asked how many books a week do you read, and 40% said they read more than 5 books a week. That's just incredible, and that
I read
shows
more
that
than that a week.
if you have to pay for that, you can't. Most readers can't afford to buy more than 5 books a week. Most books are priced at $4.99, $3.99. That's a lot of money. So KU makes total sense. That's why we're in KU, most of us.
I'm
All of us.
independent because I didn't know how to go get myself to a publisher, and no publishers have ever knocked on my door. And now that I'm established, I don't think I would want to give up the percentage to the publisher, even though being an independent author is so much work. The control is good. I like to know that I have my cover matched to my character, and that I've worked really hard to build my brand. I've worked really hard on every part of my business. So yeah, I will stay right where I'm at.
I want to talk about the fans. Readers who love this genre, they love this genre. And at GRL this year, the 4 of you took part in a baby shower. And that room was packed with passionate readers. It was crazy. All of you giving away prizes and playing party games. It was absolutely wild. I'd like for you to speak a little bit about your fans, and especially the kind of camaraderie that you're able to build around the worlds that you create, whether that's through newsletters or through reader groups on Facebook. What are fans of Mpreg like to interact with?
They're so much fun. They are so full of excitement for it. Coming to GRL, this was the first time I ever met readers, because I've been on the other side of a computer screen until now. So I come here and they come up beside me, and then they see my name badge and they do a double, "You're Susie Hawke." And they'd start shaking, or they'd tear up and they're hugging me, and they're like, "You don't know what your books have meant to me." And then they're telling me stories like they're going through chemo reading my books, or they had a death of a parent and got through their grief reading some of my books. And it's just, and what it meant to them. I was crying right along with them, let me tell you. And it's just, the fact that I've touched their lives with my silly little books, but it's amazing. It's an important thing to know that you've spread a little joy into the world, and the fans suck it in and give it right back.
One of the surprising things that I found is because I write such a broad genre, I do everything from historical to paranormal to romantic suspense to Mpreg. I have bloggers that will usually start their review with, "Well, I don't read Mpreg, but..." And when you get the "but," you've got another reader. And that's
Is that what that means?
yeah. For that is,
You've got them hooked, most
Yes,
definitely.
yes.
but the groups are very much the same. They will join your group because they liked an Mpreg book they wrote, or they like a shifter series or urban fantasy, and then they suddenly find out that you do other things as well. But because they trust you as a writer, because you already delivered it once, they will try out other things, other genres like Mpreg that they would never, ever have considered. But if you get the trust of the reader in the first place, then they will follow you in a different direction.
Yeah, I found that to be very true. That, I have a lot of readers who had read other genres with me, and maybe they'd never read Mpreg, or maybe they weren't sure, but they're like, well, I like your other books, so I'm going to give this a try. And then they end up hooked, and then they're telling me how, and then I read this series and this series and this series by these people, and,
I think that's very true for me because I started out in contemporary. When I announced I was going to write Mpreg, I got some reactions from readers who were like, why are you writing Mpreg? I don't read Mpreg. And I'm like, well, that's fine. First of all, you don't have to read it. I kind of saw it as a challenge if I could persuade them to start reading Mpreg. And I'm quite proud of the fact that I brought quite a few of my readers as newbies or virgins into the Mpreg genre, and now they're hooked. So that's how we reel them in. But yeah, I love readers in general. GRL is fantastic to hang out. I have a large Facebook group. We just celebrated 3,000 members in my Facebook group. I'm super active there, and readers appreciate that. We are very much a genre where, and in general, I think, where we build personal relationships with the readers. They really appreciate that, which I love. I'm personable myself, so.
Speaking of the reader groups, so many of my readers and the fans we were talking about before, when I met them at my tables, they'd walk up and I'd see their name, and I'd greet them, and, oh my God, it's so good to meet you. And they're like, wait, I'm here to meet you. I'm like, I know you from my Facebook group. Yes. And what my readers don't understand in my group, when they make comments and they tell me how much they love stuff, or they give me their thoughts, it is so encouraging, because writing is such a lonely profession. And there are so many times when I'm having a hard time I get a bad case of the I don't want us, and then I get the reader's excitement, and it excites me. It makes me write faster. So you want a new Susie book? Post in my group and give me a thumbs up.
And plus, we all suffer from imposter syndrome, and can hit
big
really
time.
hard.
Yeah.
And to be around an event like this, or to hang out in your group and just get the feedback, like Susie said. My Mpreg books, like my books in general, I like to tackle some more serious issues. And one of the storylines I have is about an alpha who, again, spoiler, sorry, it's about an alpha who discovers that he may look like an alpha, but he feels like a beta. So I'm kind of playing around. Obviously, it's not transgender because we're talking about Mpreg, but I'm kind of playing around with that dynamic. And I've gotten so much feedback from readers that they recognize themselves in that. My slogan is "Love has no shame." Is like you have to be who you are, no matter what that is. And that's a theme that runs through my Mpreg series that really connects with readers, where I got a lot of phenomenal feedback from readers up, and I'm proud of that. And that boosts me when I have the imposter syndrome.
I love
damn,
that.
that came bad. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Love has no shame. Thank you, Nora. I think that's a perfect note on which to end. Before we wrap things up, I'd like to ask each of you what you're working on now, and if you have any releases coming up towards the end of 2019. How about you, Susie? What do you have coming up?
Okay, I'm currently working on the next Assassin's Clause book, which is Omegaverse. The Assassin's Clause was supposed to be 20,000 word short reads that you could read in an hour after work, and then they just got to be too good, and they ended up being 40K, so they're still short-ish. But so I'm working on that. One of my popular series, Macintosh Meadows, was a trilogy last year. People have been asking, please give us Doc's story, the obstetrician in the books. Who would think that the readers would want the doctor's story, but they do. So here's what Susie's doing. I am writing a nativity story. I have a virgin surrogate Omega named Marion and Dr. Joseph, and they get caught in a blizzard, and he gives birth in a barn. And that's all going to be in the blurb, so I'm not giving any spoilers.
I love you, Susie. Seriously, that's amazing.
That sounds amazing. Susie, where can people find you online?
You can find me at susiehawke.com. You can find me on Facebook at The Hawk's Nest. That's my Facebook group. And you can find me on Amazon.
Fantastic. Victoria Sue, what do you have coming up next?
I'm supposed to have finished a series. Alpha King, Alpha Heir, and Alpha Prince is supposed to be complete. But I have a lot of people who are actually asking for the 4th. There is another couple that's mentioned. So I have promised my group that before Christmas I'm going to start writing the 4th.
Yes, please.
Yay, golf clap.
Fantastic.
And you can find me victoriasue.com, Victoria Sue's Crew on Facebook, and just wherever, Amazon.
Yeah, people will definitely look you up. Sylvia, how about you?
So I have 2 things that I'm working on right now. One is an Mpreg series, The Dragon Shifters, that I mentioned. And the first one's called The Christmas Dragon's Mate, and that's coming November 15th. And then there'll be 3 more books in that series, which I would love to have out by the end of the year, but at least shortly thereafter, they'll all 4 be available. And then I'm working on Paranormal Wolf Shifter series. It's not an Mpreg series, but the second one of those, which is Bodyguard's Bite, will be out November 8th.
Fantastic. And where can people find you online?
At sylviaviolet.com. My Facebook group is Sylvia's Salon. And then, of course, I'm on BookBub and Amazon and Instagram and all around.
Terrific. And how about you, Nora? What do you have coming up?
I just released the 7th book in my Irresistible Omega series, Alpha's Obedience, and that story was not finished in that book, so that's going to continue in Omega's Power, which I should have had finished, but there was this little thing called GRL that costs a lot of time. It's a lot of fun, but time-consuming. So Omega's Power will hopefully release within the next 2 weeks. That will be it for Mpreg for this year, but next year I'm continuing that series. I'm probably going to start a spin-off and maybe hoping for some collaboration projects. And readers can find me at noraphoenix.com. My Facebook group is called Nora's Nook, and I'm pretty much on all social media, really. I should probably cut down a little.
So much to look forward to. My TBR is climbing mile high by the second. Thank you so much to the 4 of you for joining us. It was an absolute pleasure.
You're welcome.
Thanks
Thank
for having
you.
us.
Thank you for having us.
Well, right now I am sitting across from multi-hyphenate Charlie David. He's, of course, does absolutely everything, writes, produces, directs. He's an amazing narrator, and I wanted to quickly talk about one of his recent projects. Charlie, you have lent your voice to an amazing series by Angel Knotts, the Omega Celibacy Club. What did you think when the manuscript for that first book came across your desk?
I was excited, nervous, a little bit shocked, a little bit taken aback, because, I mean, that whole universe building that's going on around Mpreg, I didn't know a lot about, and I hadn't narrated, other work like that before. So I think learning the rules, the expectations around the subgenre were definitely important for me. But I was excited. I was excited because it's so whimsical and wonderful and silly and ridiculous, but at the same time, the characters themselves, everybody, they're living their life, and what they care about and their motivations they take very, very seriously, which is, I think, imperative to a good story at the same time. Mm-hmm. So it's fun. Like you mentioned, there are a lot of characters, and I never claimed to be a voice actor, a person who can do a bunch of very nuanced, specific voices. I kind of say, I can kind of do a Southern, I can kind of do a British, I can kind of do, an Alpha and an Omega, in timbre for you. But that is the challenging thing in doing voice work, is how do I take this story that's not always written with it becoming an audiobook in mind, mm-hmm. right? Like often the writer is, they're just writing, right? And then that's our job to come in and try and make sure that there's correct pauses, breaks, inflection, speed, timbre differences that can be little clues to the listener.
Because the author is primarily thinking of the reader, but you as the narrator need to think about the listener in that
right.
particular aspect. So
absolutely. And it's not always as simple as, Jake said. And then Simon replied, right? Mm-hmm. To flag to the listener, okay, this is who's speaking now often, especially as you get into, and an exciting or dynamic scene, people are going back, very quickly without those qualifiers in place. But it's super sexy. Like, I love, all these ideas of kind of the anamorphism that goes on too, with the, swelling of a penis inside, and then it stays in there, and oh my God, I need your seed, and it's going to do this and that, and then, all the pregnancy stuff that, these young guys are going through. It's hilarious and wonderful, and I think it's a fun exploration as a dude to go through, to read about, and to imagine as well, because I think we all try to be empathetic with the women in our lives, but reading something like this just kind of helps take it to that next level where you go, oh my gosh, like, what you do is amazing.
Exactly. Well, from what you've just said, I think you have seemed to be pretty open about the experience. I mean, before you read Angel Knotts' work, had you ever even come across any Mpreg before, or was it a completely brand new concept?
It wasn't brand new because, let's see, I think it was about 2015. I acted in a film titled Paternity Leave. And it's a comedy by Matt Riddle-Hoover, is the director and screenwriter of that. And in it, my boyfriend, on the one night we switch sexual positions, a drunken night, and he ends up pregnant. And then it's happening everywhere. Then suddenly men all over the planet are getting pregnant, and we're trying to figure out what's going on. So that was really fun and ridiculous as well. And I use ridiculous in, like, the very highest praise, best context in both Angel Knotts' work and Matt Riddle-Hoover, because I think it's fun. Why not go to these places that are outside the norm?
Exactly. I think specifically when it came to the books and the characters in the Omega Celibacy Club, I have the hardest time saying celibacy.
I can't do it either. I've tried really hard.
Tongue twister.
I've tried to live it. I've tried to say it. I can't do it.
Exactly. I think what that particular series has that makes it kind of special is that it has a lighthearted whimsy, but also there is kind of an authenticity to the way these young men are trying to make it in the world and live their lives. And also it's like crazy smoking hot when it comes to work that has so many different elements to it. How do you tackle something like that? Do you just take it page by page, or?
Yeah, definitely as I get into the subsequent books, it's easier to do that because we have a lot of recurring characters and a lot of, I kind of understand the world that's been built, right? Yeah. But at the beginning, I definitely need to do some reading ahead and really, like, understand what is going on, who are these people, even the power dynamics, right? Because a lot of gay romance is written in a much more kind of equal partner. We come to either side of the table and decide to get into this. Not everything, right? I don't want to generalize, but a lot of it is done in that way. And in this Alpha Omega verse, there really is, there's the alpha, right? And what does that mean? And that it's desired and wanted. And it can still be, there can still be equality in a relationship there, but I think it explores different nuance in a way that maybe isn't always touched on in other gay romance.
Yeah. Well, Charlie, thank you for sitting down and talking to us about this. So glad that you are here at GRL and experiencing all the wonders that our wacky literary community has to offer.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me again. I really appreciate it.
This week's interview transcript is brought to you by our community on Patreon. If you'd like to read the author interview for yourself, simply head on over to the show notes page for this episode at biggayfictionpodcast.com.
I want to quickly say thank you again to everyone, Nora and Silvia and Victoria and Susie and Charlie, for taking some time to sit down with us and talk about Mpreg. It was a wonderful experience. I'm so glad we had a chance to do that.
I am too. You don't hear me on those interviews, but I was there for all of them, and I learned so much about this genre that I don't read and have so much more understanding of it now. I really enjoyed that interview.
Yeah. Okay, guys, I think that's going to do it for this week's show. Just a quick reminder, Patreon is a great way for fans to engage with creators of all types and support the kinds of creative content that you enjoy the most. We couldn't do this show every week without the help of our superfans on Patreon. The support of our community helps with production costs and ensures that the show is accessible to everybody. If you're curious about what kind of bonus material we deliver to our Patreon community members every single month, just go to patreon.com/biggayfictionpodcast. Now, coming up in episode 216, Charlie Cochet joins us as part of our series of interviews with Coastal Magic featured authors.
It's always a delight to talk to Charlie, and we'll find out what she's got coming up between now and Coastal Magic in February.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to that. Okay, guys, remember, no matter where life takes you, the journey will always be sweeter when you have a book. Until next time, everyone, please keep turning those pages and keep reading.
The Big Gay Fiction Podcast is part of the Frolic Podcast Network. Find more podcasts you'll love at frolic.media/podcasts.
For detailed show notes and links to everything discussed in this episode, go to biggayfictionpodcast.com. New episodes are available every Monday at all major podcast distributors. You can also find us on YouTube. I'm Derek McLean. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.